Someone's millimeter Peter must be in some cow manure because this shit's fucked. Trump pardons Giuliani and others involved in efforts to overturn the 2020 election. This happened earlier this morning. Giuliani, as well as Eastman, Mark Meadows, and Sidney Powell were pardoned this morning by the president. In fact, you can look at this 4-page pardon and you can see not only Eastman's name there, Giuliani's name there, you can also see Mark Meadows' name right here, as well as Sidney Powell. You can see some other individuals that are involved in here as well. But weirdly enough, the president does not receive the pardon. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, well, why did they get pardoned? Well, because they were indicted. They were indicted for conspiracy and fraud, for using false slates of electorates in multiple states, including Arizona and Georgia, and in multiple other swing states like Michigan, for example. And, of course, you can see multiple times in multiple different iterations that they were very much found guilty.
Sidney Powell pleading guilty in the Fulton County case, the Fulton County election case against her, agreeing to, I believe, 12 months probation, to pay a fine, and to cooperate as a witness in the investigation into other people, including, presumably, former President Donald Trump. I want to get...
So this is what makes it really interesting. Well, one thing's for sure. I mean, that shouldn't show just proof enough because there's multiple other ways that we can show proof for you as well. The judge determined that Rudy Giuliani was liable for lying about election workers. In fact, this was what they used the most when it came to Georgia specifically and to making their claims for other states. Freeman and Moss were the two individuals, a mother and a daughter, that were there, that were counting the votes for the electoral votes to go through, right? They were counting the votes in Georgia here. And Giuliani was liable for defaming or lying about the unfairly endangering the reputation of two Georgia election workers who were the target of a conspiracy theory, which led them to facing credible threats and harassment from that for the 2020 presidential election. So Giuliani was repeatedly spreading and amplifying conspiracy theories that were saying that the mother and the daughter were continuously counting votes over and over and over again for Joe Biden during the general election. Well, the statements and the efforts were determined to be false and unsubstantiated by the Georgia State Election Board. And on August of 2023, the judge awarded a default judgment to Freeman and Moss when Giuliani failed to turn over records in the case. Plus, he had to pay him in attorney fees. And that's just in Georgia and Arizona. There are multiple states where they have this because you keep thinking to yourself, well, if you wanted to delay the vote on January 6th because you wanted to go through these court cases, well, why not just do that? Why not just do that after November? After the vote? Well, they did. They absolutely did. In campaignlegal.org, you can see here that here are the results of the 2020 elections. In fact, Representative Liz Cheney, the former chair of the House Republican Conference, stated in 2021, 1 month after January 6th, that the president and many around him pushed the idea that the election had been stolen, and that is a dangerous claim. It wasn't true. There were over 60 court cases where judges, including judges appointed by the president and other Republicans, looked at the evidence in many cases and said that there was no widespread fraud. It doesn't exist. What we're going to do is I'm going to actually wave my hand down to show you, okay? I'm going to scroll it a couple times. 1, 2, okay. I did it 3 times. Did you see that? I did it 3 times. So the Law versus Whitmer. We're going to do that one. The district court dismissed the plaintiff's election contests on the merits. First, the plaintiff, Republican presidential electors, failed to prove that there had been either a voting device malfunction or the counting of illegal and improper votes in a manner sufficient to raise reasonable doubts as to the election's outcome. Next, the plaintiffs failed to prove that the election board or any of its members were guilty of malfeasance. And finally, the plaintiffs failed to prove that defendants had manipulated or altered the outcome of the election. The Nevada Supreme Court affirmed the district court's decision on December 8th of 2020. Now here, that's just one That's just one of 10 that we see, okay? I don't want to give you just one example. I want to give you another one. So we're going to choose Constantino versus the city of Detroit, my home. In denying the plaintiff's preliminary injunction, the court found that the plaintiff's claim of fraud would unlikely prevail on the merits. The court noted that many plaintiffs failed to include crucial information in their allegations, such as locations of alleged misconduct, frequency of alleged misconduct, names of those involved in alleged misconduct, and so on. Overall, the court found the plaintiff's claim of fraud to be speculative, filled with guesswork, and often unsubstantiated. Moreover, the defendants provided a sufficient amount of evidence to convince the courts that they had acted within the law. This decision was affirmed by the Michigan Court of Appeals on November 16, 2020, by the Michigan Supreme Court on November 23rd, 2020. Now, we can choose a completely different one. I will do so. I will not let you pick just one. I will do the Trump versus Biden. In a 4-3 decision, the Wisconsin Supreme Court dismissed 3 of Trump's 4 claims under the doctrine of latches. However, it decided on the merits Trump's claim that voters wrongfully declared themselves indefinitely confined. Ultimately, the court ruled against Trump on this claim because Trump challenged the status of all voters who claimed an indefinitely confined status rather than individual voters. Trump petitioned to the U.S. Supreme Court of writ for certiorari on December 29th with a motion for expedited consideration, but the court denied his motion to expedite on January 11th. Vote was already certified. There's multiple things here, okay, that show that not only was Trump lying about this whole situation, but other people were lying for him. In fact, companies like Fox News were pushing this. They were peddling this. They were using Sidney Powell's lies to basically push what the president wanted, or the former president at the time, what Trump wanted them to say. And Dominion clapped back in a $787 million settlement over election claims, over the lies. Fox News agreed to pay Dominion Voting Systems nearly $800 million to avert a trial in the voting machine company's lawsuit that would have exposed how the network promoted these lies about the 2020 presidential election. The stunning settlement emerged just as opening statements were supposed to begin, abruptly ending a case that had embarrassed Fox News over several months and raised the possibility that network founder Rupert Murdoch and stars such as Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity would have to testify publicly, because Tucker Carlson was found with text messages saying, "We know that what Sidney Powell is saying is bullshit. Why am I peddling this?" It's so funny. It's so funny because you have to think of it, right? Like, oh, you guys are willing to lie to the American people just so you can try and put out these false slate of electorates to get what you want. Well, they didn't get what they wanted. So instead, the president decided that he was going to go out to the Capitol and speak his piece. Now, this right here is the BBC's edit that got the guy resigned earlier, a couple days ago or last week. He resigned because of this specific edit. But then we're going to show you the context of it all.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Now, it sounds spooky, it sounds scary, doesn't it? That little teeny tiny edit right there changes the whole thing. It sounds like the president is inciting, or the president at the time, or the former president at the time was inciting the violence. It was him. He was just doing it, right? Oh, but no, he's being peaceful.
This egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Show
We have come to
show strength. Don't show weakness. You have to be strong. Well, that can be taken in a violent way, but
demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated.
now remember, we already went through, okay? We already went through the court cases, okay? Not only can we go through the court cases, we can also go through the 45-page indictment that the president had via the United States. As you can see, he had the conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct official proceedings, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Okay? Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following this election, the defendant spread lies that there had been outcomes-determined fraud in the election that he had actually won. These claims were false, right? Now, even though that was the case, the defendant had every right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election falsely, that there had been outcomes determined fraud during the election that he had won. He also was entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as seeking recounts, or audits of the popular vote, and states are filing lawsuits. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome of any state through these recounts, audits, or legal changes were uniformly unsuccessful. Now, this is where it gets interesting, okay? Because remember, Giuliani, Eastman, and Sidney Powell were some of the people that were pardoned. Those people, though, really quickly, before we go back up, okay, were these co-conspirators, the defendant co-conspirators right here. This one's supposed to be Giuliani, this one's Eastman, and this one is said to be Sidney Powell, okay? Now, the conspiracy, Donald Trump did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators known and unknown to the grand jury to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are counted, collected, and certified by the federal government. The purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct federal government function by which those are collected, counted, and certified. What they're saying here is they're using false electorates, okay? False slates of electorates in order for them to get what they were looking for. And here's what's so great about this specific thing here. It breaks down by state. You can see the 45-page document. You can read it. I'm going to put this in the link so you can read it yourself. You can read this indictment that they were going to put onto the president before he gave himself a criminal immunity, because apparently presidents can't get tried even after being president. That's never been heard of before. So when he says actual lawful electorates, he's talking about the fake ones that he had, just to let you know.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country.
Now, that is the context of the peacefully and patriotically part, okay? So, was he inciting violence? I don't know.
But I said something's wrong.
Maybe.
Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Our exciting adventures and boldest endeavors have not yet begun. My fellow Americans, for our movement, for our children, and for our beloved country. And I say this, despite all that's happened, the best is yet to come.
So, there you go. There you have it. The fact that BBC edited it that way, it's unfortunate. But guess what? He still said it. And he still, technically, incited violence. Not only was he inciting violence, he continued with the lies. He continued with the falseness. And he continued to pressure people like Mike Pence to do the illegal thing of counting the illegal certifications of the illegal votes. If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to de-rectify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back. Remember, many states disagreed. In fact, 60 court cases in all of these swing states, every single one of them. Just keep that in mind really quickly. States want to correct their votes. No, they don't, because they were already correct, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud. Plus, corrupt process never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage. This is before the speech, and this is after the speech. Now, the Republican Party, and more importantly, our country, needs the presidency now more than ever before. The power of the veto stays strong. Now, while he is tweeting this out to X, or the Twitter, 215 to say it exact, the states want to redo their votes. They found out they voted on a fraud. Legislatures were never approved. Let them do it. Be strong. I'm sorry? You're still perpetuating this. You're still pushing this out. At 344, the scoundrels are only toying with the David Perdue, a great guy vote. Just didn't want to announce quite yet. They've got as many ballots as are necessary. Rigged election. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more intense. Now they're in the Capitol. Now they're rioting. Now they're fighting. Now they're unaliving people by accident, some on purpose. In fact, a cop got tased in the neck with a stun gun, was sent to the hospital, and died of a heart attack inside that hospital. But this whole thing also had an individual named Ashley Babbitt who was shot and killed in the Capitol as she's trying to storm the remaining halls and trying to break down a door that was already barricaded off and had officers on the other side with guns pointed at her. She tried to break through the window and got shot because of it. And during this whole process, you have things like Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. He says some tweets afterwards, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. But people are already in the weeds at that point. They're already fighting. They're already violent. They're already destroying and doing exactly what him and Giuliani were asking people to do. In fact, let me just pull this little beauty up.
So, over the next 10 days, we get to see the machines that are crooked, the ballots that are fraudulent, and if we're wrong, we will be made fools of. But if we're right, a lot of them will go to jail. So, let's have trial by combat.
So, he was saying that and helping with the riling up of the people that were at the Capitol during this whole process. He was perfectly fine with saying stuff like that, even if you had lawmakers that were in there afraid for their lives. Then he says, these are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide of election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and peace. Remember this day forever. They've been attacking for hours, but that's fine. That's what we have. We're just going to let that slide. So these people that were attacking the Capitol, the 1,600 individuals that got pardoned and, after the insurrection that they've done and the violence that they did to innocent cops that were just doing their job and attempt to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power. I want to see actually what they have been charged for. But I can't. Because the DOJ decided to delete the entire database of the criminal charges. Interesting. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington sent a letter to the Archivist of the United States and the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, urging them to take action and investigate the likely violation of federal law. What federal law would that be? U.S. 44 Code 3106, unlawful removal, destruction of records. That is what they got rid of. Deleting the database appears to violate that, which requires that agencies notify the archivist upon the removal or deletion of federal records. And there's no indication that the DOJ reported the deletion whatsoever. Now, obviously, they're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to make sure that you don't get the actual history that you deserve. And of course, that's not surprising, because if the president really wanted to be a person of law and order, he would not be doing this whatsoever. He wouldn't be pardoning people like Giuliani. He wouldn't have pardoned Roger Stone. He wouldn't pardon people like Eastman and Sidney Powell. Of course, Roger Stone was not involved in this, or he could have been. We don't really know, but he was with Oath Keepers that were there at the time, hours beforehand, and Proud Boys were in contact with him as well. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. But this is where Republicans should be afraid of the midterms. What I'm going to say is this: vote. Democrats, vote. So we can stop letting this kind of corruption on our doorsteps. You don't deserve that. I don't deserve that. We as a people do not deserve that. If you like the video, like, follow, comment, subscribe, do all the fun stuff. I'll talk more about other shit later. See ya.